the first child to be a star, and the child born under the sign of fame. Everyone around him looked at him and knew that this child would become the idol of actors and the star of the theater world. Our movie today is an honor to talk about Brandon De Wilde. We will explain why someone so great had to die in such a painful and cruel way. Do you ever believe in fate or luck? People who don't believe in either will start to believe in them after watching this video, which is about a happy man who got caught in the web of fate and lost everything. The way that fate took away a lucky man's everything is a word from God to all of us. What went wrong? A lot of people think it was because of his best friend, Paul Newman. Was it real? Did he really play a part in the legend's death? To find out the answers, watch the video all the way through. First, let's learn a little about him before we talk about how he died. On April 9th, 1942, in Brooklyn, New York. His name was Brandon De Wilde. A funny thing about his life is that he was born into a family where everyone was very interested in the performance arts, so it was already set that he would become a great actor. His father, Fritz De Wilde, was also a stage manager for Broadway shows, and his mother, Eugenia, was a part-time stage player. At a very young age, De Wilde learned how to be on stage, and to everyone's surprise, he seemed like he was already ready for it. His coaches said that in all the years they had been coaching kids, they had never seen a kid with half as much ability as Andre. A genius was quickly used to describe him, and his name became well known before he even stepped foot on the big stage. The neighborhood theater productions included his mother, who became one of the most important people in his life and helped him develop his early love of acting. You should know that all of this happened before he was 7 years old. When he was 7, he made his Broadway start in the wonderful play The Member of the Wedding. How well did De Wilde do? The man really did a great job, let's just say. He was great as John Henry in A Member of the Wedding, and his playing was even better. He showed how well he could express complicated feelings with earnestness and depth. Since this was a pretty show at the neighborhood theater, his friends were pretty far behind. In the play, he had to play a figure who was trying to find his way through the tricky years between childhood and adolescence. This show did more than just well. For him, it was like a fire of fame because this guy was getting around like flames. The Donaldson Award was given to him because of how well he did. For one of the best players ever, this show was their first stage job, and now the timer for his fall had already begun. The Wedding Party Member was so well liked that it ran for 492 shows. Andre kept killing it in all of his efforts, and did a great job with them. He became one of the most famous kid actors at the time because of this. We already told you that this performance earned him the Donaldson Award for Best Juvenile Actor in 1951, making him the youngest actor to ever win this coveted award. But did everything go well for him in the end? Did the business turn him into a money-making pig? Or did he ever get to fully enjoy being a kid again? Let's find out. In light of his fame, what do you think this kid did? Okay, he didn't do drugs like some other people did, and he was too young to start. But did it always look this way? We'll see in time. As soon as Member of the Wedding did well on stage, De Wilde started getting ready for his next big part in the movie version of the play. It was just as beautiful when he played him on TV. He won a Golden Globe in 1953 for being the most potential newcomer. He was no longer the theater kid star of the future. He was Hollywood's next big thing as a child. Everyone saw why he was the most promising newcomer when he played his most famous part in the 1953 movie Shane. He didn't miss a beat. Because it was directed by George Stevens, everyone had high hopes for him. De Wilde played the young boy Joey Starrett in this movie. He became close with Alan Ladd's mystery gunslinger character Shane. Shane is considered a classic in the Western genre, and De Wilde's portrayal of Joey, who worships Shane with wide eyes, is one of his most remembered roles. At this point, he was still young, but he had already become one of the biggest stars in Hollywood. So, tell me, how do you think someone with all that fame, power, and money lives? You might think he loved like a king, but that's not the case. He was hiding so many things from everyone that he couldn't live his life like a normal person. Don't worry, we'll show them all in his film. De Wilde was now a good young man. He behaved like a girl sometimes, and there were stories about it. But we'll talk about them afterward. He thought it was time to get married, so he began looking for a bride. He met Susan Margot Maw through friends they both had in the theater business. They fell in love right away. He married Susan on December 19th, 1963. Susan was a great partner, and they had a happy marriage. You'll find out what happened after the fact, but only at the beginning. When they had a son named Jesse De Wilde, he took over their whole lives. Things started to go badly when Hollywood and De Wilde's personal problems got too much. Their relationship started to suffer as their personal lives got worse. Susan could take it no longer, and on March 21st, 1970, they got a divorce. There was a 2-year wait before De Wilde met Janice Jarrow. Someone very strong, she let De Wilde in when everyone else turned their backs on her. De Wilde married Janice Jarrow in 1972. She was the one who accepted him even though there were many bad things said about him. On March 25, 1972, they got married. That being said, how did their friendship grow? What's going on with their lives? Everything was turned upside down because what happened was so upsetting. You'll have to wait until the end of the video to find out. One important thing to keep in mind is that Hollywood in the middle of the 20th century was a place where stories and guesses could shape how people saw a star. They were so strong and mean that they could turn these actors into real-life superheroes. Oh, and they could also ruin their lives. It's still the same if you think about it. This just shows that in show business, the public's opinion is what determines an actor's worth, no matter what age they are. But at that time, stories and guesses were even more important than what they had done professionally. Folks had heard a lot about De Wilde by this point, and it would have been strange if they hadn't. They hit him hard and fast. While he was becoming an adult star, some people talked about how good-looking he was. Being told that people like the way you look is nice. Soon, though, these nice things about him turned into rumors when he was seen with other stars a lot. They thought it was odd that he didn't hang out with women very often, so these smart people started calling him gay. You should remember that this was a time when people would rather bury LGBTQ people than sit down with them. He couldn't advance in his job if he didn't do something about these rumors. To make things even worse, Hollywood at that time worshipped traditional masculinity. If you tried to act a little too much or too out of character, well, you could kiss your job goodbye. Things were getting tough for De Wilde because he had always played cute parts and was now an adult star, which put him in a lot of trouble. Because one mistake could make people think he was impotent or gay, he had to get rid of his boyish look at some point. But the question still stands, was he gay? He kept this secret from everyone very well. Do not worry, the answer will be given to you at the end of this film. De Wilde tried to play parts that are more typically male, but it wasn't enough. He stood out because of how his food looked. People in the business started to think about his personal life, which was a pretty big red flag for him. In the 1950s and 1960s, people were very strict, so actors couldn't live freely and had to hide the fact that they were gay. If you made even the tiniest mistake in telling people that you are a man, it's game over. When it came to Pokey from our old school, too many people thought that his actions and speech were gay. These ideas were too risky because they could easily make an actor's professional skills look bad, which happened to a lot of actors during that time. Now comes the crazy part. The friend we talked about at the beginning of the video has joined our story. Also, was it him who ended De Wilde's life? When rumors spread that De Wilde was having an affair with Paul Newman, his career began to go bad. Let us tell you that Paul was one of Hollywood's most adored stars. Millions of women swooned over him because he was so good-looking and charismatic on screen. It was said that he had relationships with both men and women, though, which led many to believe that he was gay. When Brandon De Wilde and Paul Newman met for the first time, it was in the early 1960s. Both actors were at very important points in their lives at the time. However, Newman was already a well-known star, while De Wilde was known for his part in Shane. People say there was something special between them. They first talked because De Wilde respected Paul so much, and Paul was glad to have him. We should remember that Brandon De Wilde was a very good young actor, and a lot of people thought that someone like Newman influenced De Wilde, who was younger and didn't have as much experience. Others agreed with the idea that De Wilde wooed the famous actor. The most popular idea, though, is that Newman started the relationship with his charm and power in the business. It made sense because De Wilde was weak and easy to influence in many ways, so someone like Newman could have been able to lead him astray. It was said that they started having an affair that ran for about 3 years, but Paul, or they will never say when it happened. Their relationship was different from other ones. It wasn't sweet and happy. But there were many ups and downs. Sometimes it looked like they were going to break up for good, but their love for each other kept them together. Many people didn't know about De Wilde and Newman's connection, and there's no solid proof of it either. But people who saw them together often knew they weren't just friends. In love, they looked at each other in a way that not even their wives could have. But people who were close to them noticed how strong their bond was. If you had to guess, when do you think the stars fell in love? It began when De Wilde told Paul how much he admired him, and things kept going from there. In the end, he became his emotional slave and had to ask for his approval and direction in every job move he made. It would have been fine if that was all. People around De Wilde knew he wasn't himself, so he tried to hide it. He didn't have many close friends because of this. He had to count on Paul's approval for everything, which left him alone and isolated. His fame made him feel lonely and sad, really. With the help of drugs that made his life a daily hell, he did things that he would later regret. He had never used drugs before. In the early 1960s, he began using drugs and drinking, when he had to live up to other people's standards, but now he didn't start getting high until he had already taken too much. In the late 1960s, things got even worse when DeWilde began to lose his job as well. The pressure of social support, the fact that he couldn't say what he wanted, and his drug use made him bad at his job. He was living so badly that even a small part would have been a big mistake for anyone to give him. He had dropped so low that he couldn't even look himself in the mirror. He used to be a big star and a bright newcomer. Now is the most important part of the story. Some people say that if they ever were dating, it ended for good when Paul went to see DeWilde one last time in 1972. He talked to him about this 2 months before the big event. You will be shocked by what we're talking about. Please bear with us. What did he talk about at this event? Newman said that he told the young actor to stop using drugs and drink and to stop doing things that are bad for them. He tried to reason with him because he was the only person who would listen. Even his wife, who had just gotten married, felt bad about what she did. He didn't have any real friends, so Newman was the only person who was still in his life. That was so funny. The person who messed up the other person came back to make him think. Newman told DeWilde that he needed to give up the things that were taking over his life. What did these words from his friend or his supposed lover do to him? Was it the worried look on his wife's face that made him change his mind? 2 months after our last conversation with Newman, the big event took place, so we couldn't have known everything. Brandon De Wilde was driving his camping van in Lakewood, Colorado, a suburb of Denver, on July 6, 1972. The report says that he was on his way to a Denver hospital to see his wife, Janice Jarrow. It was raining. It was about 3:25 p.m., so he might have changed his mind and was trying to get to his wife, which may have been caused by the light rain as he lost control of his car. His camper van went off the road, hit a guardrail, and then hit a parked work truck. The van rolled over on its side, putting all of its weight on DeWilde, who was stuck in the wreckage. He reportedly tried to fight his way out of it, but the concussions, RGA damage, and internal bleeding made every second a living hell. Accident and careless driving were blamed for his death because DeWilde wasn't wearing a seatbelt at the time of the crash. It's strange that he didn't die right away, though. He held on for dear life and saved. Anthony Hospital was rushed to help him. It was in the hospital that he died of his wounds at 7:20 p.m. His back, neck, and leg were broken, among other injuries. His sudden death at age 30 shocked Hollywood and left a hole in the movie business. His painful and tragic death was the end of a life full of unrealized promise. So many people were upset that he wasn't able to enjoy his life to the fullest. He was like a gem. The only thing that was scratched was the outside of his soul. But he left. It's a shame that the famous child genius died in a terrible car accident because he had so much potential. One of the worst things he left behind was a wife who was just married. She really loved him. Even after all the reports, she agreed to date him. But he left her to deal with the world on her own. It was said that he was worth about $11 million when he died at the age of 30.